Welcome to B2B Bytes. Today, I'm joined by Kazenmeyer from Tradecentric. He is VP of Channel Development, and he's responsible for the strategy and growth of Tradecentric's partner ecosystem. That includes the penetration and adoption by B2B buyers and suppliers. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Tradecentric, they are a provider of, amongst other things, e-procurement solutions. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Hey, thanks for having me, Lance. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Well, let's start with the obvious question. What is punch out? What is e-procurement?
What a great question, because I kind of been doing this for a long time. And if you want to think about technically speaking, e-procurement is the business-to-business purchases between two organizations conducted online, right? So basically where my system's talking to your system and we kind of do it all behind the scenes. But basically, e-procurement and punch out is what buying organizations are utilizing to help them in the purchasing journey by extending that capabilities throughout their organization. So e-procurement software, it basically replaces the old paper-based operations by automating traditional procurement. And it also helps you gather a lot of data and analytics to analyze your spend and look for cost-saving opportunities as well.
So as a business, I should think about this as tools that as a buying business, that the folks around my business can use to place those orders. And then I can get, maybe as the finance team or as a procurement team, I can get data analysis of what's being bought across the whole business. Is that kind of fair and accurate?
That would be the ideal state. Yes. It's if you can get all your suppliers on board, that is perfect. But yes, that's the ultimate goal.
Gotcha. And so if I'm a distributor of product, let's say I'm an HVAC distributor, and my customer is using one of these systems, maybe actually we should list the systems in a second, maybe the most popular ones, and using one of those systems, how do I sell to them? This seems very different to paper or email or even e-commerce.
Yeah. So it's basically, if I'm a distributor and my customer is using one of these platforms, so let's just call them out: Ariba, Coupa, Jagger, iValua, Workday. I mean, the list goes on and on. NetSuite, you can name a whole slew of them, 150 of them, out on the market. It starts with something called punch out, and punch out is a process that allows buyers to shop on a supplier's e-commerce storefront from within their internal purchasing application, right? So basically, punch out authenticates that buyer into that supplier's storefront without having to go through a login page. And now that buyer can see all my custom pricing, my custom items, and all the availability really at their fingertips. And so if I'm a distributor, I want to be at the fingertips of every user in an organization so that I show up in front of them and I'm their first choice when it comes to buying or trying to find a product that meets their needs.
So let's just to recap, make sure I got that right. I'm not actually changing my e-commerce site when I'm implementing punch out. The punch out system or the e-procurement system is connecting into my site itself and then using that. So I don't have to change my e-commerce site. Is that a good way to think about it?
That's a great way to think about it. And so you're not really changing your site. There may be some modifications that you want to do from an experience standpoint. So traditionally, when you're in an e-commerce application, you have a checkout, right? Well, the checkout in an e-procurement system is actually returning the cart back to the buyer so they can run it through some workflow and approvals on their side before they ultimately send you the purchase order.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So that follows the workflows that are set up on the supplier side. So I'm this distributor and I'm thinking about e-procurement. How do I know if my customers are using it? How do I find that out? And then, how do I then connect that up such that this buyer that I've got is now able to purchase through their, you mentioned a few systems, Ariba or Coupa or Jagger?
That's a great question. And so you mentioned what I do for Tradecentric. And one of the other things that we do is we do strategy sessions, because what you find is that many suppliers today they don't even realize their customers are ordering on these platforms because sometimes they don't ask the questions, right? But when you start asking them, how are you receiving orders today from your supplier? Or how are your sales team getting orders from your customer? They'll start to tell you, oh, I have to go to a portal to get an order. Or my customer service team receives emails every day from some site. And when you start to unpack it, it's actually coming from an e-procurement system. And so they don't realize that they're taking on this whole manual effort when there's opportunities to really seamlessly integrate and provide that service and also provide opportunities for yourself to get benefits out of it.
I love that. That's really funny. So if you speak to your sales team, you may actually discover that a whole slew of your customers are already using an e-procurement system. You just didn't know about it because they were logging into a portal to pick up that order, and it just happened to be a Coupa portal or an Ariba portal or whatever it happened to be. So you may know your customers may already be using it and you're not aware of it. Is that right?
Yes. And so you think about this, sometimes sales teams are creatures of habit and they like to be in front of the customer, and they may have that comfort level of, well, what happens if I'm not there? They may not buy from me. But what happens if you're there? Sometimes you're just, an extra step for them now, and you're not making their life easy because you're not in their procurement system, right? And what we find is that when you start to show up in their procurement system, it actually helps you grow your sales. So, the first place to start is to start with sales team. And one of the first questions I usually tell sales teams to ask your customer is, how do you buy your office supplies? Because if someone's utilizing an e-procurement system to buy, it's kind of a given that an office product supplier is the first one out of the gate that's going to have a punch out and an e-procurement integration set up with them.
Gotcha. They're going to have that system already set up. That's how the process that they're going to be using. Okay. And so I'm selling my HVAC items. Maybe office supplies is a better example, maybe. And I found out that my customer is actually using an e-procurement tool. They're using Coupa. What do I do? What's step one? How do I go about getting more integrated such that we have a better experience and hopefully this buyer is going to start buying more of my products across their organization?
So I'm assuming that you don't have the capabilities today, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
So I would say step one starts with a functioning commerce platform. You'd be surprised at how many times that, we talk to a supplier that says, my customer is demanding that I either show up in their procurement system or they're not going to buy from me anymore. And the first question we ask is, do you have a live and functioning e-commerce platform? And some of those suppliers say no. It's for informational purposes, for marketing purposes. It's to get quotes. Well, that's not going to cut it in a new procurement world. So the first step is really having a functioning e-commerce platform, right? And if you have a functioning e-commerce platform, the next thing is, how am I going to enable it, right? How am I going to make it punch out enabled so when my customer does that request, I can actually point them to my commerce application and allow them that visibility into my platform without them having to log into my storefront. And that's typically where a company like Tradecentric comes in, or you could do it on your own if you want. But what we kind of find lately is that it's a big lift to kind of build it up on your own. And the DIYers of the world, they've kind of been doing it for a long time and they're experts at it. But if you're going to pick it up and start from scratch, you're probably going to want to look for a partner that could help you. And then just to build on that, there's some partners out there that actually have connectors into these commerce platforms, like we have with BigCommerce, that make it kind of rather easy to kind of connect and set your storefront up to accept these e-procurement integrations and configure your application for punch-out.
I love that. There was something you said there that I wanted to double click on, that the buyers may need to use an e-procurement platform. And if you're not present on it, they may not shop from you. That is incredible. And if you already have an e-commerce site that is functional and you can purchase through it, a partner like Tradecentric can make that connectivity without really needing to make any changes to the e-commerce site itself. There may be small changes, I think you said, but not wholesale changes. You could be up to how quickly can a customer get onto, or a distributor, I should say, get onto that buyer's e-procurement tool?
Well, again, that could be a loaded question, because sometimes it's all around the readiness side, right? From a buyer perspective. But think about like what we have in place today, and I'll use BigCommerce as an example. The connector that we have in place today allows us to rather seamlessly connect into your platform, and with the additional support that we've come up with for the B2B edition, it even allows this multi-storefront capability that within a couple of weeks, we can have a functioning punch out. Now, the next step is, how do you configure that to your buyers? And really, it's going out and talking to buyers and finding out what platforms they're on. And then that's when Tradecentric works with that supplier to kind of set up and configure each one of these accounts. So you figure, within 2 to 4 weeks, you could probably have a functioning e-procurement integration, from punch out to getting purchase orders electronically, no more going to a portal to pull down an order or receiving them via email. And then to top it all off, to be able to send electronic invoices, which is something that buyers are really demanding lately. And then from there, you could start looking at all the platforms that Tradecentric has connected to. And now that opens up and expands your reach, because maybe you had one buyer demanding it, but now you can go out to multiple buyers to find out what platforms they're on and connect them a lot easier as well.
I love that. This has been such a great session, actually, a real deep dive into what is e-procurement, what is punch out. I think our listeners are going to hopefully walk away understanding what that is and how easy it could be to utilize it, and some of the benefits. I think we'll have to have another session where we dive a little deeper into some of the ROI of implementing an e-procurement system. But Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me. I love the conversation.